Afternoon, everyone. So welcome to Valton's latest webinar. I hope you're all surviving well in the current heat wave and keeping cool. As the title suggests, we're going to be talking all things compliant and specifically looking at Microsoft Purview and how you can plan your compliance strategy around using the Purview tool. So just a very quick run through of the agenda. So my name is Martin. I'm Customer Success Manager here at Valto. I've been with the business just shy of 2 years. And I'm also joined by my colleague Steve today. So Steve, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Afternoon, everyone. So yeah, Steve Glasspool here, 365 consultant here at Valto. Actually joined the company only back in February, but been working with Microsoft 365 for the past 9 or 10 years.
Perfect, brilliant. Thanks, Steve. Yeah, so we're going to talk obviously just a little bit about Valto to begin with, before we move on to a basic introduction to some of the key tools within Microsoft Purview and how you can certainly plan your compliance strategy around this tool. And of course, we'll come around to a Q&A at the end. We may not get around to every single question, but for those that we don't, we'll certainly get back to you in the follow-up material that will come in the coming days. So first, a bit about Valto and a bit about us. So here at Valto, we're based in Chester in the Northwest and in London. We're Microsoft Gold partners in multiple competencies, and we're committed to adoption and change management within organisations that we work with when they're adopting Microsoft technologies. There are two main sides to our business, known as the MS365 team and our development team. We can discuss that at another point, so please do reach out if you'd like some more information on that. But yeah, the slide just presents some information about Valto and the work that we do. So moving on to Microsoft Purview and looking at essentially what it is. So Microsoft Purview is the bringing together of a number of Microsoft solutions. So the 365 Security Center, Azure Purview, and the Compliance Center have been merged into Microsoft Purview, whilst adding, of course, a number of new features which we'll explore today. So really, Microsoft Purview, the idea is to help your organization to govern, protect, and manage your entire data estate. Of course, the licensing you have on your Office 365 tenant will determine the features and functionality you gain access to. So this applies to all compliance elements as well. So the table that we have here on the screen highlights some of these features and whether they're included against some of the more popular licensing SKUs. So we can see we've got Business Premium, 365 E1, MS365 E3, and MS365 E5. And you can see at a high level the elements that are included. Whilst this is useful, the link here that I've got below, so if I just show you this on my other screen now, so this takes you through to a full comprehensive guide of Microsoft licensing and details what you get as part of your specific subscriptions, and they group it together for you under some useful categories, like we can see here. If I scroll up just a section, we've got meetings, calls, and chats, and we've got the licensing across the top here. So really, really useful. This comprehensive guide will certainly detail what you do and don't get as part of that specific license. Okay, perfect. Obviously, we'll be sending this out, so you'll gain access to that guide as well via the link in the slides that you'll receive in the coming days. So as part of Microsoft Purview, you receive nicely presented information to view your compliance levels. This encourages really good behavior and it's actively prompting you to improve your compliance score. It details what you can do better and also how you can improve your score. It's also a nice meeting point of language as well between the tech versus non-tech. You don't have to be technical or have that technical experience in order to interpret the information that's being shared with you in this platform. And at this point, I'm going to hand over to Steve, who's going to give a quick demonstration of this within Purview.
Perfect, thank you, Martin. So let me just get my screen sharing for you all. Okay, we will bring up the Purview Compliance Manager on the screen. So as Martin mentioned earlier, of course, everything is now rebranded into Microsoft Purview. So whereas you would have initially went into your Compliance Center, your Security Center, as Martin mentioned, that's all now merged into Microsoft Purview, and the new branding and naming is being rolled out across the 365 platform. Within the Compliance Manager is where we can start looking at our overall compliance scores. This is the first area to take a look into to really get an understanding of how compliant your organization is and how compliant 365 is for you. This dashboard here will give you a number of items that we'll just briefly run through. Firstly is the core score itself, which is actually split into two parts. Firstly, your own points that you have in place. So these points are delivered based on different setups that you put in place, things that we'll go through during this meeting, such as data loss prevention, labeling, retention schedules, etc. But also a number of Microsoft managed points as well that are in place just based on the services that you have in place there and the services that Microsoft provide you as a cloud platform provider. So there's already a number of points that you'll have on the board by just utilizing 365, but there's always room for improvement to push this further. As we can see, we've got a number of different improvement items that are in place. You can track these items, obviously a large amount available that you can actually run through. It may not be necessary that you need to complete all of these, but it'll certainly push you in the right direction to keep your tenancy highly secure. The score also breaks down into a different number of areas, and each area has a number of points. So you can actually see areas that you can do better in, such as here, protect information, and areas such as managed compliance actually we're doing very well in, and we might want to change our focus to another area which has a bit of a lower score to bring that up. We can click into our view improvement actions, and if we go into there, that will bring up a set of different actions that are available for you, which you can go through. You can sort, you can filter these as required. So look at the ones that give you the highest scores or the ones that are related to the systems and the solutions that you're actually looking to protect. Further to this, if we jump into any of those particular items, so such as here, applying sensitivity labels to protect sensitive or critical information, this will give you a screen that will advise you on how this can actually be done. So it gives you information about how to implement it. It will give you links to relevant Microsoft articles, and it will also point you in the right direction within Microsoft Purview to actually get the job done. A number of other items in here, such as testing and test plans, so you can check any updates that you make. Linked regulations and standards, so if it relates to anything that was GDPR related, for example, and the ability to host documents within here, so work that is taken to actually apply this information onto your tenancy. The final thing just to mention on this dashboard here is that there are a number of different links around. So if it's your first time jumping into Purview, do just take a look at some of these links that are populated across the page, such as learn how your compliance score is calculated, because again, it takes you to great Microsoft artifacts and articles that just gives you further information. But Martin, back to you.
Brilliant, thanks very much, Steve. Share my screen again. Okay, perfect, brilliant. Okay, so yeah, thanks very much, Steve. Moving on. We then have conditional access configurations that you're able to set up to effectively manage your data using Purview. So you can assign different configurations based on who's using what, where they are and what they're using. So who the user is, their location, and of course the device that they're using. So block access 365 allows you to prevent access to your environment from non-work issued devices. So again, it's keeping your data secure and only aligning it to corporate devices. Restrict access 365 allows you to place certain Microsoft applications into read-only mode. So applications such as Outlook, SharePoint, Teams become read-only when they're being accessed via the web. You can enforce MFA, fairly self-explanatory, but of course, this forces multi-factor authentication for all users, and that's rolled out via a security policy. And trusted locations and devices allows you to tailor your MFA experience even further. So trusted locations such as your office or your home address, and trusted devices such as a company mobile or a laptop, they bypass the need for MFA when that policy criteria is met. Unknown devices and unknown locations would require that MFA step again. So a really good example of this is if I'm working from a coffee shop as opposed to the office. When I'm in the coffee shop, I need to prove who I am via MFA in order to access my company's data. However, from the office, I don't need to complete that step. So again, it's making it more meaningful for you as an organization. You can also set up data loss prevention configurations to protect your most valuable data. This data such as credit card details, passport numbers, they can all be protected in an efficient way. So you're able to create custom detections for specific company data. So DLP recognizes the data that is potentially going to be sent out from your organization and then prevents this from happening. You can see an example of that, or an example of that alert just on the picture there in the right hand side. So quite clearly, it looks like somebody is attempting to send out maybe some passport numbers, and this is the notification that you get. It highlights the issue, and you can see that it's calling on that sensitivity label that's been applied to that specific document there. Managing and protecting your data internally is just as important, and information protection labels allow you to do this. So Microsoft Purview information protection helps your organization to classify, label, and protect data based on sensitivity labels. These labels help users to understand the importance of the information that's being handled, but also helps our compliance administrators in discovering where sensitive information lives. So again, it's all in line with keeping everybody compliant and keeping your data secure. Not all data needs to be kept on our systems forever, of course, and the data lifecycle management tool can certainly assist with the cleansing of that information. Data stored on OneDrive, SharePoint, Outlook, and Teams can all be configured so that they follow certain rules, and after a certain time period has gone by. So, for example, finance and HR data, maybe CVs and employment data, these can all be auto-deleted or flagged to a user or archived after a set amount of time. You can set up rules that are triggered after a certain date or event as well. So, for example, a document that has had its last modified date over 7 years ago can be automatically deleted. Of course, there's certain legislations that we all have to follow and keep up to date with when it comes to data and how long we keep it for. And the data lifecycle management tool certainly makes it a less manual task for us in order to cleanse that data and ensure that we're compliant. And again, I'm going to hand over to Steve, who's going to demonstrate some of the features that we've mentioned here.
Excellent. So let's get my screen back up and running for you all. Okay, so I'm just going to cover a few of the items just in the previous slides that Martin has gone through, just where you can batch them together. So firstly, I just want to have a look at the data loss prevention area, otherwise known as DLP. So this, again, within Microsoft Purview, allows you to actually set up relevant alerts and policies relating to documentation that might store things such as Martin mentioned, credit card numbers, could be passport numbers, identifiable information that you want to be notified of if they're being stored in your system or being sent out of the organization, and unbeknownst to you, it's got data in there that actually you don't want to get to the outside world, outside your tenancy. So within data loss prevention, you have the option to go and set a number of policies into place, and we can go and create a policy within here. Just give that a refresh. And we'll try that creation again. There we go. So when we go to create a policy in place, we've got the option to create ones from existing categories or create our own custom policy. If we look at one of the existing categories such as privacy, we can look through here and see a number of different templates that Microsoft has provided. One that everyone's probably aware of is the GDPR data protection regulation. So if we click on that one, it actually has a setup template ready for you. So the information this is going to look out for is what's listed here. So essentially European debit card numbers, driver's license, passports, etc. But you do have a number of different templates based on different recognized data all across the globe. So if you are a global organization, you can start protecting pieces in Australia in a different way to what you protect in Europe, for example. Okay. We can also look at creating our own custom policy. So if we go into custom, we select custom policy and we hit next. We can give it a name. I'll just keep to custom policy, but again, this form basis will give you mandatory fields that you can fill in. So just make sure that you put things into place. Always recommended to pop a description in place so you're aware of what this policy is actually looking out for. If we hit next once again, we have the option here now to look at where we're actually going to apply this policy. So by default, it's applying across email, SharePoint, OneDrive, Teams, etc. But you can switch these on or off as you so wish. And you can also dive into actually setting it up in a more granular layer. So if, for example, we just had this focused on SharePoint sites, we could go and pick which SharePoint sites from all of our sites in our tenancy that we actually want to apply it to. Or the other route of that is we could actually exclude it from a couple of sites. So if we want to apply it to 90% of the sites and leave the other 10% behind, we can exclude certain sites out there. Maybe you've got an extranet site where you're expecting that information to actually be shared with an agency or a partner. Once that's all set up correctly, we can hit next and go into our actual customized policy setup. Two options within here, they will differ depending on what you set up initially. So we're not setting up a template, so we don't need to go and review and customize anything which is part of the default template. We're actually creating and customize our own advanced DLP rules. Okay. If at any point you're unsure about any of these items, again, do always hover over the little eye icon or click through to that to get further information. But once again, nothing more we need to change on here. So we'll move forward. And then we can get into the rules engine. So again, as an overview, if we hit create rule, we've got the option to pop our name into place. Again, a mandatory field that we'll need to have in place there. and we can start looking at putting different conditions, exceptions, actions, etc. Now, we're not going to drive into all the in-depth detail of this. This is very much just an overview, but to give an idea of a condition, if we go into place and we look at when content contains a certain bit of information, so we can say content actually contains a certain type of sensitive information, and we have a number of different items of sensitive information which are in place here. We can search through these. So if we look at EU debit card, we'll get the EU debit card number up, which was one of the options that was shown within the earlier template. So we can pop that into place. We can give a confidence score, and we can look for, are we looking for that just to appear once in a document? Are we looking for it to appear a minimum of 5 times? And we can set those rules up into place. We can also define different exceptions. So there may be exceptions to the rule that if it contains a debit card number, but it also contains a passport number, actually we're okay with that document going out. So, we can set what's accepted and what is going to be blocked. Actions. So this will provide access or provide actions around access. So in terms of whether we're going to restrict or encrypt that data, if we're going to remove the file. So again, we can define what action is taken when this rule is being triggered. We can switch notifications on. Always recommended to notify a key IT support or quality or compliance email address so that more than just one person is notified of these items. And again, a number of different information down here, such as your override and incident reports, etc. But again, just conscious of time, not to dive into every single element of that. That just gives kind of a high-level overview of the data loss prevention rules that can be set up into place. Now, with the sensitive information, if we look under data classification, we do have a number of sensitive info types that are available. So again, this same list is in place. So we've got our passport numbers, our debit card numbers, etc., which are the ones created by Microsoft. You can see 212 of them that are in place. We can, though, go into here and create our own sensitive information. And when we go to create that, give that another refresh because it's not going to load up for me. Give me 2 moments. There we go. And if we pop another item into place here, it's going to force me to pop a description in there. Let's do that. Okay, and now we can start setting up some patterns. Again, I won't go into depth in here, but if you've got any specific IDs or identifiers that is unique to your organization or unique to a certain regulation or standard that you're following, you can build your own sensitive information types, and then you can link that back into data loss prevention. So we can set things such as what elements to look for, whether there's characters nearby, etc. So a few kind of regular expressions that can be set up. Again, the key thing is think about that data firstly that you're wanting to protect. Identify the patterns that you've got behind those IDs and IDs and numbers, and then come into here to set the relevant pattern up to join it in with data loss prevention. Okay. Next item on the list is our data lifecycle management. So this is where we can look at our labeling of documents around the retention. So how long we keep a document for, or what happens after a set period of time, either after an event or from when the document was created or last modified. So we can hit create label. Once again, we can pop a name into place. And then we've got a few options in terms of our labeling setup that we can put into place. Okay, each of these have a description in place, but just to give an overview, you can set that items are retained forever. So let's say, for instance, you've got a finance record that will be deleted after 7 years, but actually cannot be deleted before that 7-year period is up. This would be utilized, so you define that you retain those items for that specific period. And if someone tries to delete it, it just won't let them do that because there's a retention label in place. Or you've got the ability just to enforce an action after a set period of time. So again, this could be after 7 years, but if someone chooses to delete it before that 7 years is up, actually you don't mind, that's just clearing the data up. Okay, so one of them will keep that data until such a time when it needs to be deleted. One of them will make sure the data is deleted after a period of time, but does give you the option to delete it earlier if you so wish. And finally, you have the ability to just label items, really just to put information against them, but don't actually have any processes that automatically delete or archive the data, more for informational purposes. And you may have a manual process or a data controller that's going to go through and actually check those items. If we just select the first one there and we look at the period, we can define length of time. So we've got 5, 7, 10 forever or custom, so you can set that specific to your retention schedule. And we've also got a number of items for when that countdown should actually start. So when the item was created or when it was last modified, for instance, or we've got trigger-based retention, which is based on an actual event that you put into place. One such example of that is for a product. So it may be, for example, you have some product user guides, and that product user guide will last for the lifetime of the product, and then for 10 years after it's taken off the market. You would go into your Purview center, you would define that this product has now been taken off the market, and then your 10-year countdown for all documents associated to that retention period would start. Final thing from me on this demonstration is information protection. So we can take a look at the sensitivity labels that are in place here. Much like all the others, we've got a label section to which we can go and create a label into place. And we'll fill in the form and all the mandatory fields that we have here. So we'll just give it a quick test name and description. And then we can start looking at the scope for these labels. So again, depending on the specific setup of your Purview environment and the licensing, you may be applying this to groups, sites, data assets, etc. We're just going to look at the items area. So essentially applying it to documents within your tenancy. We then have a couple of options against the items. So we can choose whether we're going to encrypt them or whether we're going to mark them, so add a watermark and a header, footer, etc. to the items. We can do both, or we can do one or the other, completely up to us as we go through this. I'll select both for the time being and hit next, and then we can see the options that appear. So firstly, we can look at the encryption setup. So we can define here whether users assign the permissions or we assign them. We can look at when content is going to expire, so we can define a certain date, number of days after the label, or just allow it to continue and never expire. We can define offline access, so can people synchronize it, can people use it offline, away from the tenancy? And then we can actually assign our permissions into place here. So we can add a number of groups or users. Just to satisfy this, I will just pop a relevant user into place. And I'll save that. So I've now got some users that would be allowed access to this document based on this label being applied. Anyone else who's trying to access it wouldn't gain access to that document. We then have our content marking. Again, we've got the option for watermarks, headers, and footers. We can have all three or one or two of those, completely up to you. And we can customize the types of text that we have in there. So we may want that to say confidential, font size 18, in red, and go diagonally across the page, for example. Once that's all set up in place and we move forward, you do have the option for auto labeling. Again, we'll discuss this a little bit later in the presentation because it's related to the E5 licensing, but essentially we can start looking at conditions that identify documents, much like data loss prevention. Any documents that hold a credit card number, you automatically mark as confidential and only allow managers in your business to be able to read that document, for instance. So you don't have to go through and manually label those documents, again, if you've got the relevant licensing in place. And once that's all done and set up, you can just create that label and then go and apply it to a document. And if I just bring Word up into here, you'll see within Microsoft Word and within the Office suite, we do have the ability to click on the sensitivity button at the top ribbon. We can click that and we can see a number of different labels that are in place. So I've actually got this document marked as confidential for all employees. And we'll see on the document that we've got our confidential watermark across the document. We've got it classified as confidential within the footer. And we've also got an encryption in place here. So if I was to send this document out to everyone on the webinar who's not part of Valto, then they would open the document and get a warning that says you can't access this due to the document being encrypted. So that actually lives with the document at all times. It doesn't just live with you sharing the document on SharePoint, for instance. That's everything from my demonstration. So just like to hand you back to Martin, please.
Thanks, Steve. Just go back to the presentation. Okay, perfect, brilliant. So Purview can also assist with subject access requests too. So information is retained within Purview, allowing you to search and export your results. The bullet points on this slide just show you where you can obtain that information from, and it's perfect for dealing with GDPR data requests that you might receive. So data can be accessed, as we can see here, from Skype for Business or Microsoft Teams chats, any mailboxes associated with an MS365 group or mailboxes within Microsoft Teams. All of your SharePoint sites and your OneDrive for Business accounts within your organization, all team sites and Microsoft group sites, and of course all public folders in your Exchange Online environment as well. So as I say, perfect for handling GDPR data requests and subject access requests. And you can see the picture on the screen just nicely shows you how you can export those results after conducting a search against the name as well. So really handy and really useful. Steve, I'll hand over to you for the next couple of slides.
Perfect, thanks Martin. If you can just pop onto the EDiscovery one then, perfect. So EDiscovery, similar to the subject access request, it uses similar technology in terms of identifying documents, identifying information within your tenancy. With EDiscovery though, it has a few additional features in place, such as legal hold and case management, as you can see on the screen. Now from a legal hold perspective, this allows you to start preserving versions of documents, whether the document is deleted or updated or modified in the future. You know, if you found those documents relating to a specific query, you want to keep hold of that document, because it may be potentially that you need to utilize that document in a dispute, in a case, and you don't want certain content that was in that document actually being deleted, being removed, or even worse yet, the entire document actually being deleted and not being able to be got at again. So this just makes sure that if there is any type of legal investigation that's ongoing, you can keep hold of that document at all time, and you can make sure that you can preserve all the information at that point in time when that happens. Case management takes that one step further and actually allows you to group that data together, but actually set up relevant case managers and case members. So it may well be that you get a team of people together, maybe your legal team, that are looking at a specific case. You've ran an EDiscovery, maybe multiple EDiscoveries, and you've got a number of different documents in legal hold, and they're all within a case where that team has access to. So it's just about keeping that all in one central location so that you can manage that up until the dispute has finalized, or up until that data doesn't need to be kept any longer. So all about discovering the data within locations across your tenancy, keeping hold of it so it can't be deleted or removed, and getting relevant personnel who are responsible for that data, responsible for the case, all in one room, all in one place to actually manage that. If we can move to the next slide, please, Martin. Excellent. So from an auditing perspective, lots of different auditing capabilities available within Microsoft Purview. So things such as people opening documents, sharing documents, changing permissions, etc. Loads and loads of different items that are searchable. Auditing is switched on within the tenancy, so you always have that ability to go back and check things that have happened in the past, and run searches in case there was a particular breach in place. Now, for most licensing, you do have 90 days of data which is being kept. The E5 plan does increase that. You've got 365 days worth of data in terms of looking backwards. Okay, you are able to search the log, export items from there, and look through that data, but again, it's only the 90 or 365 days worth of data, depending on the licenses you've got initially. You can also set up alerts on that data as well. So if there's a particular breach you're looking for, such as documents being shared externally, you may want to create an alert that actually notifies your quality and compliance team or your IT support team to notify you every time that particular audit search has been met, so that you can deal with it at that time. If it's a certain set of documents you don't want to be sharing externally, and for some reason an owner is doing that, you can get alerted and actually be proactive in terms of fixing that. Now, there is the ability to keep data for longer. You can utilize Azure Sentinel for this, or any other security information event management system. And this will actually allow you to capture that data in a back-end database. So versus having the 90 or the 365 days, actually you could have that data indefinitely, because you will continue to essentially be backing up that data at all times. If we can take a look at alerts a bit further on the next slide, please, Martin. Okay, so I touched upon alerts briefly there. So we can define a number of different alerts. You can define who they're actually sent to. As you said on the bullet point there, really critical that this doesn't go to just one individual user within your organization, because that potentially becomes a single point of failure. It should really be going through one of your core systems, such as your ticketing system, or your compliance tickets and non-conformances, etc., so that more than one person can pick it up at any one time, and you're identified and alerted about this, instantaneously, because it could be something which is very much a breach in terms of documents being shared outside the business that you need to lock permissions down to stop things getting any worse. Okay, your alert should always be tweaked and changed. So every organization is different in terms of things they need to look for. Their governance is slightly different, so always look through the alerts that are set up. Microsoft do have some that are already in place, and there's some examples on the screen there, but you have the ability to modify some of those or create your own. Okay, taking Azure Sentinel a little bit further, so we remember that that was storing previous data. So again, further than 90 and 365 days, actually you can have data indefinitely. You can also set up Azure Sentinel runbooks. So this actually allows you to go and run alerts against data from many years back, for instance. So it may well be the case that you have a breach today, you search through that data for that breach, you've identified that and been alerted of it, and now in terms of a preventative measure, you want to go back over your last 2-3 years worth of data and run that same check for that alert against older data, so you can be proactive in fixing things that might have happened in the past that could come up again in the future, that might not have been something that you were alerted for back then, but now you've identified it. Maybe it's a change in regulation, for example. If we now just move on to a few additional licensing pieces for E5, so we've got a couple of additional items that are available. The first thing is insider risk management. So insider risk management is based on an event happening in the organization, whereas one of your employees may potentially be a risk to your business. And the reason they might be a risk is because they're potentially someone who is going down a capability measures route. Maybe there's been redundancies. Potentially they're just moving to another organization, to a competitor. And they could potentially delete a lot of data, or they could take a lot of data, take all of your sales lists over to their new employee to get new customers to move across. And all of these things actually look like standard daily activities in most instances, downloading documents, sharing documents, emailing documents, etc. Okay, so insider risk management allows you to actually analyze these user activities and set specific policies against them to detect those different risk activities. So you can see on that picture there, we've got things such as data theft, data leaks, etc. So we can start identifying those. We can also then tie that to specific users. So if there's a set of users that are leaving the organization, someone's serving their 3-month notice period, for example, you might want to then set an analysis piece against that user just to check that there's not a sudden surge of documents being downloaded from their sales environment, for example. Okay. When you've got these alerts, you'll have triggers in place, so it will alert you if those things are taking place. You can review them, you can look at the scores, and you can also turn that into a case as well. So if you actually do need to turn that into a case in terms of EDiscovery and hold on to that data, you've got that option to turn insider risk management into a case to manage moving forward. Final piece on licensing is just around the automated labeling. So again, I did touch upon that slightly earlier. So there is the option to, of course, label documents in terms of sensitivity, encrypt documents, etc. And within E5, you have the ability to actually set up processes to automate that labeling, so it's not a manual event. Again, that might be that you've got a set of documents that meet your GDPR data loss prevention policy. So it has an EU debit card, an EU passport number in there. And at that point, you want to mark that document as internal confidential, so that if you did send that out externally from the organization, it would be encrypted. People wouldn't be able to open that document. It would be watermarked, and you'd have all of that in place without you manually needing to make that decision. So again, these are a couple of items that come via E5. You'll see that as part of the link that Martin shared earlier that will come out with the slides, so your in-depth guide to all of the licensing. Excellent, Martin, back to you.
Thank you, Steve. Yeah, so we'll have a downloadable guide being released in the coming days to help you with planning your own compliance strategy. This will be sent to you in an email, including the slides we've been through today, the recording of today's webinar, and of course containing all the links to the useful good stuff like the licensing that we saw earlier too. The important aspects to consider when you are planning your own compliance strategy, they're highlighted on the screen, and really it all starts with licensing. The licenses that you have on your Office 365 environment will determine the features and functionality that you can use. So first point is to make sure that you've got the right license in place for the features that you want to take advantage of. It's important then to consider any label requirements you'd like to add. We can tailor those alerts and the functionality that we've mentioned today, and configure your compliance roles and work closely with those that are responsible for security within your organization to roll out policies effectively across the organization. There's some really great useful information from Microsoft to help you get started as well. So we do have a couple of links here that take you to, the first one is for MS365 licensing comparison, fairly similar to the document that we saw before, but it does just go into your licenses and answers typical FAQs around what licenses you should use for what features. And then secondly, we've got a security and compliance guidance, again from Microsoft, but a really nice, useful guide to help you get started. And then finally, just a reminder on this slide here, when we do send it out, this is where you'll see our compliance strategy and our downloadable guide. So that will be included on the presentation as well. And with that brings us to the end of today's webinar. Thank you for joining. I hope you found that valuable. We'll hang on for a couple of minutes in case there are any questions. So do feel free to add those through, and we'll pick those up as we go. But any that we don't get around to, we'll certainly come back to you within the follow-up over the coming days as well. Okay, so thank you very much, everyone.
Martin, we've just had a question in.
Yeah.
Just in terms of start being missed, but we've got everything recorded, and this will be shared with the presentation slides and be posted up on the YouTube channel. Is that right?
I believe so.
Easy deciding factors to choose between E3 and E5 for security. I mean, the biggest piece around the E5 licensing is the insider risk management and the automated labeling. So, you know, in terms of a lot of what we've gone through, you're going to get a great deal of it from the E3 license that's in place. Again, once the slides get sent out, do have a look at the documentation that's in place and look through to see really from a granular level all of those pieces you're getting, because essentially on an organization per organization basis, there might be one thing that really does stand out for an E5 license versus an E3 license that you just cannot live without. And if that is, you know, if there's a reason behind that, then it's worth going down that avenue. But essentially a lot of what we've gone through is going to be covered with the E3 licensing. You know, not a lot of people need to step right up into that E5 licensing unless there's something really in particular for them to use. So yeah, difficult to say if there's a potential deciding factor. I mean, insider risk management, automated labeling. If you definitely want those two things, great, go for the E5 licensing. If not, review what's in place and align that with your organization. You know, you can always work towards that license moving forward, all about bringing your compliance score up initially. Okay, we'll just give a few more moments to see if there's any additional questions to come through. Looks like that might be it for questions, Martin. So I think, again, to echo what Martin mentioned earlier, if there are any other questions that you think of off the back of this webinar, you know, do reach out to us. drop us a line. We're always happy to talk to anyone about everything Microsoft Purview, everything Microsoft 365. But again, just to echo Martin's thanks. Thank you all for joining us.
Brilliant. Thanks, Steve. Thanks, everyone.
Cheers. Perfect. All the best, guys. Bye.